shapeshifters roamed, witchcraft was a thing to be feared, and children were taught not to whistle at night. In his youth, Mr. Milford went looking for the paranormal, but it always seemed to find him. When he joined the fabled Navajo Rangers, a law enforcement branch of the Navajo Nation, who are equal parts police officers, archaeological conservationists, and historians, the paranormal became part of his job, alongside addressing the mundane duties of overseeing the massive 27,000 square mile reservation. Milford was assigned to utterly bizarre and shockingly frequent cases involving mysterious livestock mutilation, Skinwalker and Bigfoot sightings, UFOs, and malicious hauntings. So in his book, he'll cover that, and of course, he'll do his presentation. Let's welcome Mr. Stanley Milford Jr.
Good evening, everyone. So, for me, being here, it's an honor to stand before members of the Navajo Nation, the Dene tribe. For me, this is an honor that I know if my mother and father were still around, they would be very, very proud. This has been a long journey to this point, to stand before you people here. I really didn't foresee getting into and performing, investigating the paranormal. That was never my purpose or mission at the time that I began working as a law enforcement officer. So there has always been, from that time, I would say, something from a higher power that has pushed me to bring this information to the masses, to the forefront, to let people around the world know that these things that people call paranormal or supernatural, that these things are real, that it does exist, and that those people that experience, whether it's a haunting or seeing a UFO or even the phenomenon known by names like Sasquatch or Bigfoot, people that have these experiences, for the most part, can and will be traumatized, especially young people, children. And during the time that I worked as a ranger, almost all the people that I assisted with these investigations were traumatized on some level. And there's some phenomenon, like things related to witchcraft, that's even more traumatizing than other things. So with this presentation is really my effort to let people that are interested in the book know the details that went into writing this book and how it came about. And so, like I said, that's been a pretty long journey at this point. So I'm just going to jump right in. There's the cover of the book. That's my Hollywood picture. I was assisted by Deanna Dover. She's a photographer and makeup artist, and she's the daughter of Jonathan Dover, who's a retired lieutenant that I actually worked with doing these investigations, and she kindly helped me by going out and doing this photograph for the book. for HarperCollins and William Morrow Publishing. These photos right here is, on the right is a picture of my father. He's wearing a Riverside sports jacket. In the center is my mother. My mother's name was Emma Lorraine Stacy, and she was from Tahlequah, Oklahoma, which was the capital of Cherokee Nation. My father, Stanley Milford Sr., he was born in Fort Defiance at the old Fort Defiance Hospital, where I was born there too. So I was born on the reservation. My father had traveled to Oklahoma to get his teaching degree. At that time, it was Northeastern State College in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, capital of Cherokee Nation. He had traveled there to go to school and get his teaching degree. Today, that's Northeastern State University. And so when he went to school there, he ended up meeting my mother. At the time, I think she was working as a waitress there in Tahlequah, down on Main Street. And soon, they ended up coming back to the Navajo reservation to start a family. And another picture of my mother and my dad. My dad was also a hoop dancer back in the day. At one time it was said that he could use more hoops than any other hoop dancer. My father was also avid sportsman. In the bottom right-hand corner here, he was playing a tournament there in Oklahoma City, I think, there. And he was known for his sports abilities. Really, when I came out to the Navajo reservation, I really didn't understand that. I couldn't understand that. That my dad was gifted as a basketball player. One time, when I was about 9 years old, I'd come out for the summer, and he said, "Son, I'm playing a tournament at the sports center here in Winter Rock." He said, "Go with me." And so we came in and he played the tournament. And at halftime, they were having a free throw tournament. And I seen my dad get up there. He volunteered to go first. And I seen him get up there and shoot 100 free throws in a row without missing. And other people get up there, maybe they would make 19 or so, and then they'd miss one, they'd be out. And so my dad ended up winning that free throw contest, and he ended up getting this trophy that was taller than me. And so when we drove home at the end of the day, that trophy was hanging out the window because it wouldn't fit all the way in the car. So, and then I knew, I understood what it was that people would always be saying about his ability to play basketball. That's a picture of my mother holding me and my dad and my big sister Deborah. She's 5 years older than me, and she's at the back of the room back there, so she's helping me tonight. So my first home was here on the reservation. My dad was teaching school, and Deborah was in school. But when I was about maybe 2 years old, my mother and father separated. And my mother ended up taking me and Deborah back to Oklahoma to raise us there. We would come out to the Navajo reservation during the summertime. My dad would fly me and Deborah from the airport in Tulsa, Oklahoma, out to Albuquerque. And we would get off the airplane there. At that time, the airport was this adobe structure there in Albuquerque, and you could smell the change. You could smell the way the rains had a certain earthy smell, and it was different. And you knew you were coming onto the reservation as you would drive out. You'd see the red rocks, and so really it was leaving one culture behind, the Western culture, and coming into the Navajo culture. At that time, my great-grandparents, William and Rose DeHosey, were still around at that time, and I remember being at their home, and there would be the smell of mutton stew and fried bread, and there would always be a big old pot of coffee. I remember first time I was out there, and so I was just little. I was like 5 or 6 years old. And I went up to my dad and I said, "There's nothing to drink," because they were eating and stuff. And he said, "There's coffee right over there." So as 5 years old, I went over there and got my first cup of black coffee that you could probably float a horseshoe on top of it. So, but that was my, again, Deborah accosted me there, and then me wearing my dad's Chief's bonnet. So in Oklahoma, my aunt and uncle ran a really large cattle ranch called Ponderosa Ranch, northeast Oklahoma. And the little blonde-haired boy there is my older cousin. He's about a year older than me, Rusty. And his parents were the ones that ran that cattle ranch. And so this cattle ranch was several thousand acres, with about as many cattle on it, too, a couple of thousand livestock. But he and I, growing up, I'd go over in the summertime and stay with him sometimes. And he had these motocross dirt bikes, and him and I would be racing all over that ranch. Half the time they didn't know where we were at, but we'd be playing cops and robbers. And the television series at that time, really big, was Starsky and Hutch, and we'd be playing Starsky and Hutch and cops, and we watched Adam 12 and these different shows. And I think that really had a big influence on me to secretly harbor this idea to be a law enforcement officer. And growing up in Oklahoma, me and my sister were really blessed in that our childhood was like a music appreciation class. You can see there behind me where I'm sitting in that chair, she has her vinyl albums there, which she had hundreds of albums. From the Motown days to the Beatles and Rolling Stones and even things like Sinatra. And so I grew up with that love of music, even to this day. And I dabble in playing guitar and drums and all of that stuff. Used to play in bands during college years and stuff like that. So in my life, I was really blessed living both of those different worlds. That's me after high school, came out, I was working construction with Parks and Recreation at the fair office, getting ready for the fairs each year. And during that time, I started going to college at Haskell Indian Junior College, getting my AA degree. The other picture over there on the far side is me in Oklahoma. You can see how green, and that part of Oklahoma is known as green country, and for a reason. That's me during my heavy metal days after high school. That's me with my sister's dog, or wolf, Montana. I still play guitar today. Don't really have the hair like I did back in that day, but yeah, I still play guitar. Still have an interest and love in music. So there's me taking my oath at the U.S. Indian Police Academy in Artesia, New Mexico. How that came about, I was actually enrolled in studying pre-med at U of A down in Tucson. And the director for Parks and Recreation called me up down there, and he said, Stan, we're really needing a law enforcement officer, a ranger in Monument Valley and some of the other park areas. We don't have anybody to patrol those areas. He said, I was wondering if you'd consider coming back and going to the police academy and to become a ranger. And at the time, you know, having that drive, having that desire to be a law enforcement officer, I made up that decision there on the phone when he was talking to me that I was going to do that. I was going to come back home. I played it off to him. I told him, well, that's a big move. He said, I tell you what, I'll think about it over the weekend and I'll call you next week and let you know. I had already made the decision right there though. And so I called him back next week and I said, yeah, I'm going to take you up on your offer. I came back home and gave up, you know, what I had started in the pre-med program, which I'm sure there went a lot of work went into getting the scholarship and everything for that. But something in me told me I was making the right choice, you know. And that's what I did. Came home and went to the academy in Artesia, and really I did really well at the police academy. For me, it was about keeping your mouth shut, doing what you're told. A lot of the other recruits I was with, you know, they would question, why do we have to do that? Why do we do this? And they'd end up in trouble, face down on the ground doing push-ups. So I had served as the first squad leader for that platoon, that academy. I even served as the commander of it for a while. And so came back, I was commissioned, I was issued a badge and gun, and I got to work. Almost immediately, one of the things I had experienced was what was known as the Four Corners manhunt up in Montezuma Creek, or in that Four Corners region. 3 militia individuals out of Colorado, they gunned down and killed a Cortez police officer. And that led on this huge manhunt. Over 500 different agencies represented there. And Navajo police at the time, they were needing some kayaks and canoes and stuff taken from down here at the headquarters, and went out to Montezuma Creek, and they asked me, Stan, can you bring that equipment up? I had a Ranger patrol unit at the time. I said, sure, I can get it up there. And I did. When I got up there, I had met one of the commanders that I knew with Navajo police, an individual named Clarence Hawthorne from Lupton. So he said, I brought the equipment up there, and he said, Stan, would you want to work with my SOT, or they're basically SWAT personnel? And I jumped in on it. I said, yeah. I said, if my chief and my commanding officer will give the approval, I'll do that. So I got assigned, you know, I got the approvals, and I got assigned to work SWAT. And crawling through the underbrush and on my belly, face down along the San Juan River in the Russian olive and tamarisk. And that really, right off the bat, solidified the work that I would end up doing for the rest of my Ranger career. I did later become a SWAT team member and commander for the Navajo Rangers, which a lot of people never knew that Navajo Rangers had a team at that time. We had seven-man SWAT team, and we would be called out to do different types of warrant stuff, assist Navajo police when there was a man with weapon calls and stuff like that. In this photograph, in the middle, I was actually asked by the former director of the museum, Manny Wheeler, to assist with securing the actual Navajo Treaty of, say, 1868. So there was 3 copies of that treaty, and this was one of them that was brought out, and to actually hold, right there's an actual panel from that treaty, and to be given the honor to protect that and to watch over all of us here. There's no, really, you can't put that into words. It was just such an honor and awe-inspiring. And I also was a federal firearms instructor for pretty much my whole career. On that far side, you see me at the Federal Police Academy. So we did boat patrols on the San Juan River and different special operations, especially under Special Projects Unit, which later was the section that I ended up being assigned to that investigated paranormal activity. Under Special Projects, on this side, I escorted with John Dover a spelunking group, people that go into caves. And we went into the deepest, it was said the deepest cave in Arizona on the reservation, along Marble Canyon. And we took those people down into the very bottom of that cave to map that cave out. They've got this device that shoots out these hundreds of lasers, and it'll actually create mapping of that inside of that cave. It was pretty, when it comes to paranormal stuff, paranormal is not really a big deal for me. But that was pretty scary doing that, because in there was some rocks that were like the length of this stage that you could actually move with one arm. They would be cantilevered in there, and everything, all the rocks moved. It was pretty hazardous going in there. And matter of fact, one boulder that was bigger than like an SUV got loosened, and if one of the cavers hadn't got out of the way in time, it would have crushed him just like a little bug. So that was a pretty interesting experience. And there's me doing the SWAT thing over on the other side. And that image right there, I submitted to my publisher, HarperCollins. I think that's the one that ended up being used on the cover of the book, part of that illustration. And there's my partner, Jonathan Redbird Dover. He is part Navajo, but he's part Philippine. He's a part Apache. And I learned a lot when I worked as a ranger under him. He had always been a ranger for like 10 years, I think, before I came on, something like that. And he had been a police officer with Winslow PD before becoming Navajo Ranger. He started his own department under a historic preservation, and really knowledgeable guy. I mean, in all respects of law enforcement. And he was somebody to look up to, I enjoyed working with him, At times, there were times we were being, shot at and things like that. But we always, relied on our training and our faith in the Creator to get us through all of that stuff. And so I was very lucky in my career. I never had to use deadly force on another person to take a life, thank goodness. There was times where it came very, very close to that. There was a couple of times where I had actually made the decision in a situation where I knew I was going to have to take another person's life. But at the last minute, that individual complied with my commands and ended up, it was resolved. But yeah, there was a couple of times, and there was another time where I was shot at. I was laying on a berm using binoculars. We were looking for a person that had shot a few people, and as me and one of the criminal investigators were laying there, glass in the air with binoculars, a round hit about this far right in front of me, so about a foot away, and so I was lucky a number of times. So, the paranormal. The unique thing with the investigations of the paranormal were that my chief at the time, Leonard G. Butler, he had been the chief of police for Navajo Police for a number of years. And later he came over to the Division of Natural Resources as the chief ranger. And Chief grew up on the reservation. He was steeped in the culture and very knowledgeable about so many things. Again, I was very blessed to have worked under his command. He taught me a lot and taught me how to keep myself alive throughout those 23 years that I worked as a Navajo Ranger. And but to Chief, as a law enforcement officer, we had sworn an oath to help people and to protect people. And to him, when the first time there was a paranormal case, it was a Bigfoot case, and there was an elderly grandmother up in the Chuska Mountains during sheep camp, and she said that this Bigfoot stepped over into her sheep corral, picked up one of her sheep, and took off with it. And so there was 2 young rangers that were assigned, and one of these rangers is, he's like a comedian. He's always laughing and carrying on, and everything's a joke, and it's just his personality. And he doesn't mean to offend people or anything, it's just who he is. And so they were up there, and I think that offended the grandmother. I think she overheard him carrying on back at their patrol unit or the sheep corral, and she thought, this guy he's not even taking this serious. And you guys know on the Navajo Nation how important livestock are. I mean, that's our livelihood. And so she contacted the chief, and the grandmother contacted the chief and chewed him out. And so he called a department-wide meeting, and he says, okay, so you took an oath to help people, to protect people, protect their property. And that's what you're going to do. He said, if you can't do that, then you're going to have to find some other employment. You may not understand these type of cases involving, the paranormal or supernatural. You may not understand that. You may not believe it. But he said, you will, if you're assigned, you will investigate it. And you will investigate it professionally and to your best of your ability, just like you will any other case. And John and I were sitting over on the side as part of the special projects, and he said, and you two are going to oversee these cases or manage these cases. And for me and John, it was like, yes, sir. That was our response to the chief ranger. Out of respect, when we were given an assignment, we were going to do that assignment 110%. So really that's how all that began. It wasn't that, we didn't set over there, raise our hand to become the Navajo X-Files or anything. To him, if you look at the culture, you look at medicine men and ceremonies, this is a part of our culture. And even the negative stuff, the shape-shifting thing, that's a part of our culture too. And for a lot of people, it's a very traumatizing experience, seeing that, hearing that, witnessing that. And for him, it was very important to be there for the Navajo people, regardless of what it was. Regardless of what it was, if they were asking for help, you were going to help them to the best you could. And that's what we did. So this particular image right here is from a case up in Saley. You can see the heel part of this Bigfoot track. You can see the toes up here. And very interesting case. This was taken from one of the cases. We did have some specialized equipment coming after 9/11. We had some grants that we received, like forward-looking infrared or FLIR thermal cameras. And here you can see the tracks of this thing where it walked. And on one investigation, we went out and a family up north was experiencing one of these Bigfoot around their home. And they said it had been there ever since they had been there for decades. And so they invited us to come out one night, and we went out there with a team and using night vision and thermal equipment. And that was one of the times that I witnessed this thing that people call Bigfoot, and it was just like what people describe. Something that was bigger than a man, something covered in hair, just similar to a bear, but maybe more, more shaggy. And this thing was probably a good 9 feet or so tall and bulky, it was very big. And so the next day, me and one of the investigators went out to that same location to check for any other type of evidence left back behind by this thing. And we got there and we walked down the road where we came in on, maybe 3/4 of a mile. We started walking back. All of a sudden, we started having these rocks come through the ponderosa pine trees, landing within about 10 feet of us. And there was a total of maybe 15 of these rocks. And where they were coming from, later was determined that it was over 500 feet down, and these things were coming up through you could hear them. It was like a cannonball. This particular rock right here probably weighed a good 20, 25 pounds. It was big, and it sounded like a cannonball coming through. You could hear it coming through the trees. So we would get ready for it, and really interesting phenomenon. And there's a casting of Bigfoot impression. That was one of the rocks right there that was coming through the trees. And I had done an investigation into a haunting in an office space in Winter Rock. And at one point, that photograph right there, that was on my arm. I actually watched that line form and the scratch open up on my arm. And it eventually bled to, in that particular case. In that particular case, it was one of those where it was extremely extremely eye-opening. So it was a haunting investigation. One of the directors from one of the programs up in Winter Rock had came to the chief ranger at the time, and he said the staff there are experiencing strange things happening in our office space, and it's actually disrupting the workplace. Do you have anybody that can come in and determine what's going on or validate what's going on? And so the chief assigned me, and I went in and I put together a team of 4 investigators, and so I went in on the first night, 2 nights. The first night, went in and did a walkthrough of the building, and it was just me and another investigator, the guy who had all the keys to the building. And him and I went in, and I did a walkthrough, and I was thinking about how I'd go about conducting the investigation. And in the downstairs part of that building, there was a large wooden conference room table. And I was standing there thinking about how I'd go about, because all of this was new to me, this investigating paranormal. And I was standing there leaning against that table thinking about, how I'd go about setting up the investigation. And as I was standing there, all of a sudden it was like somebody put a finger on my upper lip, their index finger, and moved their finger from one side over to the other, and then back across. And after it stopped, there was 2 male voices within about 5 feet of me. There was distinctly male voices, but there were 2 different male voices, and they were carrying on a conversation. And there was nobody else in that room with me. And so immediately I knew there was definitely some type of phenomenon within the building. So the other 2 investigators arrived, and I did my briefing with them on how we'd go about this. And almost immediately, we began experiencing this phenomenon called an apport. That term was really widely used during the era of, in this country, in the late 1800s and 1900s, when families had lost loved ones during the Civil War. A lot of people died during the Civil War, and there was a lot of families that were trying to reach out and get messages from their loved ones. And so with the apport, that involves the movement or appearance of physical objects. And in this situation, the phenomenon was coins. So in that 2-day investigation, there was a total of 66 coins. Sometimes the coins would come flying from the top corner of the room. Sometimes they would hit us. At least 10 of those coins during that investigation I watched fall out of thin air, out of nothingness. There's nothing here, and all of a sudden, the coin drops it in the floor. And I witnessed at least that 10 times during that investigation. One of the unique features with the coins was that they would hit the floor, and that lower floor in that building was poured concrete. They would hit, and you could hear it from a long distance. They would maybe make a big arc, come in, spiral in, and then fall over. Out of all of those 66 coins, every single one of them landed heads up. So you know, and I know, naturally, out of statistics and probability, that it's not going to happen. Whatever coins you would have, let's say 100 coins, about half of them would land heads up, half of them would land tails. It's just the way it works. And with this, every one of them. One of the other unique things with that phenomenon was that it immediately followed me and the other investigators to our houses. So the coins started dropping in my house and just out of thin air. That phenomenon, that investigation happened in 2009, and to this day, that phenomenon still happens around me. So I could be traveling places like Canada, it happened all over the United States. Even one time I went to the UK and Scotland, and the phenomenon happened there, and again, it just out of thin air. You know, I was at a Love's truck stop one morning, getting coffee. There was this tall, skinny man standing next to me, and we're waiting in line for this guy's at the cash register in front of us, paying for his stuff. All of a sudden, in front of me and him, a coin fell out of thin air right in front of us, and in the floor. And I turned and looked at him. His eyes were huge. I know he's seen that phenomenon happen just right there in front of him. Because when it first started happening to me, your brain is trying to wrap around, what the hell did I just see? What did I witness? And you're trying to rationalize and make sense of this. And I just smiled at him. I leaned over, I picked up the coin and put it in my Levi's jacket pocket, paid for my things that I left, and he was still standing there. He was still in a certain level being traumatized from that. So one of the investigations I did involved an elderly man where he witnessed a UFO coming in and around his home. And there were he described these little beings or entities. Well, the way he described it in Navajo was that they were like little children. They come around the front of his house. Everybody else was down in Phoenix visiting one of the grandchildren that was in school down there. And anyway, family was away from home. He thought somebody was driving up to the home, and he went outside and watched this object go around the home, and it's shining beams of light down, and it's described like 25 feet in diameter and bright like the sun. And it goes up and it hovers above one point of the tree line. Excuse me. And a little bit later, these little beings are walking around his front yard. He describes it like they were looking for something, like they had lost something, they were looking for something. Each one of them had this device in their hand, kind of like a flashlight, kind of like a laser beam. But he said the beam was like an inch in diameter. And they were walking around, shining those beams of light all over the place, and each one of them had a different color. One had a yellow one had a blue one had a green one, and one had a red one. And they were really interested in his solar lamps. So he had solar lamps around the front of the house that goes along the flagstones out to the outhouse at the back of the house. And the solar lamps line that little walkway. So they would gather around the solar lamps and the lights would go out. And then the four of them would back off from it, and then the light would come back on, and then they would crowd back around the lights again. And he said they just kept doing that back and forth, and they were really interested in that. And they finally went around the back of the house, and he finally got the courage to go out there and confront whatever this was. And so, but he ended up tripping the back of the house. And you know, and I know for an elderly person at that age, like over 80 years old, that you can get seriously injured. And he finally got up, and when he got back to his feet, these little entities had gone all the way back near where the object was that was hovering above the tree line. And pretty soon that object came back to like came back to life. I mean, started shooting these beams of light and it started moving a little bit. And it went along the tree line, which that particular area had been hit by a wildland fire years before, and the trees were just like skeletons. They were all decimated. And so this object went along the tree line at the top, and he said all of a sudden it shot up just like a bullet, about a 45-degree angle, and that was gone. And this object never made any sound when it was encircling the home, or even when these things were coming toward his house. He said they didn't make no sound, even through the heavy, after a wildland fire, the stuff's burned and it's crunchy, and he said you couldn't hear anything as they were coming through his house. His little dog, he had a little bitty pup that ran out when these things were coming toward the home, and that little dog yelped, I guess, when it made contact with these things. And within a week, that little dog passed away. The little dog died. I don't know if it was due to being affected by the contact with these things or whatever, but yeah. That case really, really impacted me in my understanding of these different phenomena, especially UFOs. And so the elderly man was interviewed. I think we did like 4 interviews over like 4 years, and his story never changed. We even had assistance from the Mutual UFO Network down in Phoenix, MUFON. They sent investigators come up with their STAR team and assisted with that investigation, doing interviews and stuff. And then we also had assistance from Robert Bigelow Aerospace out of Nevada, who's known for buying the Skinwalker Ranch up in Vernal, Utah. He bought that ranch, and he had a team of investigators studying that ranch. But he was involved. He assisted us with a couple of investigators, and they had all of their fancy high-dollar toys, taking all kinds of measurements and stuff. But it was really compelling, and his story never changed. And there was other people that were saying, "Oh my gosh, these production companies want to pay you money for your story and stuff," and he wasn't interested in that. He wasn't interested in being known or anything like that. He was just this little elderly Navajo man, which I had a lot of respect for, coming forward and sharing his story. And but really unique and interesting. There were other investigations like UFOs where a young she's probably in her mid-20s, Navajo girl, witnessed a UFO that came down off of these mesas near their home, and followed her as she's driving home late at night, and really impacted her. A lot of these things are life-changing. I had an experience in seeing this thing that people refer to as a skinwalker, and at the time I witnessed this thing running by my vehicle in my college years when I was out here on the reservation. And it's something that I'll never, ever, ever forget. This thing, while I was running by my vehicle, I turned that way to see what this was, and it's looking right at me, and its eyes were the color of this exit sign up here. It had the eyes were like self-illuminated, and this thing was looking right, like it was looking right through me, and it was ugly, and something I'll never forget. Something I'll take to the grave. Just like seeing the Bigfoot thing, it's something that I won't ever forget that. We had investigations where mother and daughter had witnessed a UFO out on a long stretch of highway on the reservation, again, it was life-changing for them. UFO that was over 100 yards long and ended up being 3 stories high. So it was a huge object. And we had other investigations on the reservation where these craft and object were coming down and making contact with people and stuff. This was taken from Channel 7 News. They were covering an air show in Gallup, and they ended up witnessing and filming an object that was flying in that airspace. And that was one of the coins right there. Investigation. Today, I have that's a 66 coins in that original investigation. Today, I have a huge Ziploc bag of coins. What I'll do is, when it happens, I'll photograph it and I'll date and time it. I'll put it in a Ziploc bag. I'll describe where it occurred and you know, what type of coin it was, how it landed. But it happens so frequent now. I recently did a presentation up in Farmington, maybe I think it was in October. And during the few days that I was staying with friends up there, we had a total of about 25 coins that materialized up there at our host's residence. So again, it's still happening to this day. It doesn't bother me. You know, I've seen medicine men about this phenomenon, and I've seen other shaman from other tribes and stuff. And they've told me it's not something that I have to worry about. That what I've come to understand is that it's a spirit of somebody that I knew, maybe a family member, that causes the coins to happen to let me know that they're around, that they're present, and giving me a heads up that I'm here. You know, we analyze the coins all the years and the type of metallurgy that's involved with the coins, and you know, there was just nothing there in that data. But I came to the conclusion it was just something that simple, that it's spirit. You know, with indigenous peoples and native tribes, we have spirit animals that communicate with us. At different times in our lives, we'll see animals that ended up communicating some type of message to us. And I think these coins, for me, same kind of thing. It was a warning in that original investigation, because there was some other phenomena and entities within that building that were, I would say, borderline demonic and involving maybe witchcraft and stuff. So I think these were a warning by spirit, letting me know that, hey, you need to be careful. And that's that landed in my house. That was the only non-US coin that I experienced. That one night I had just purchased a new Glock pistol. In law enforcement, you know, you're always having guns. And I just bought a brand new Glock pistol, and I was photographing it like you see in the gun magazines and Safeway and places, you know. And where I worked SWAT, you know, I'd have night vision and different equipment, and so I was shooting these pictures of this new pistol, and just as I turned around in my kitchen, on the kitchen counter, this coin fell. And it was a Taiwanese coin. You know, a Taiwanese coin ended up, you know, in my home, falling on the kitchen counter. I don't know. I know I didn't have those kind of coins in my home. So this was in an investigation, a hunting investigation. So One of the investigators was experiencing phenomena in his house, and we went over there. Me and another investigator met him over there, and he had a large double wide trailer, and in the middle of that kitchen there was a island countertop, and above it had one of these racks that holds all your pots and pans, and on one corner there was this basket, 3-tier basket that holds fruit, and in the bottom basket was grapefruit. And as I stepped into the kitchen, the homeowner, other investigator, he was right behind me. And as I stepped in the kitchen, this knife flew out of one of those blocks that holds all your cutlery or kitchen knives. This 12-inch knife flew out, and it flew about 8 foot, and it went right through a grapefruit, right there, right in front of me, within 2 feet in front of me. The homeowner was in shock. He couldn't believe what he just witnessed. And I pulled him aside. I said, whatever this is, this entity, this energy, if it wanted to hurt us, it obviously could really easily, but it didn't do that. If anything, this is some type of message from this thing. But that was one time that I experienced, something that could definitely lean more toward, something, what people refer to, religiously as evil or demonic or something of that nature. That was a UFO case from up north. So John Dover and I, we'd experienced where there was a drowning on the San Juan River, and Navajo Police and National Park Service were trying to recover this person that had drowned. And John and I put the department boat in the water at Lake Powell, and we started traversing up the San Juan River. We had gotten up there, I think it was, what we had measured was something like 70 miles going through the canyons and stuff. And it was getting late in the evening, and we just decided we're going to camp out overnight, and pulled the boat off and got out all of our camping equipment and everything, and our cots. And we were on the north side of the river facing to the south, and as I was laying there on the cot after it got dark, all of a sudden there was this object that appeared similar to a satellite, how a satellite would appear at night in the sky. But this thing was at least 4 times or maybe 5 times larger than these satellite objects. And as this object was coming across the sky, it was coming from west going to east. And as it was coming across the sky, it was zigzagging, real sharp zigzags. And as it got right above us, about the 12 noon position, there was 2 F-16 fighter jets following in behind us. And John's a military buff, and he knew what these planes were, military jets falling behind us. He said, yeah, that's F-16s. You can tell by the afterburners. And as it got right above us, that object continued with that zigzag pattern, but it went from 12 noon to the edge of the horizon in about 1.5 seconds. And it just left the F-16s up here trailing like a little kid on a tricycle. And seeing that, it's another one of those moments where your mind is trying to wrap around what you just witnessed and what you've seen. And I've never seen any type of actual military craft or anything that, working in Monument Valley, a number of times I've seen the SR-71 Blackbird come whipping through the sky, and the X-17 bombers and stuff. But seeing that, witnessing that otherworldly performance was pretty amazing. This I blurted out, but this was an image of what I seen running by my vehicle that night in Fort Defiance. What I experienced was, so I was home for the summer working in I was working and I was on break from Haskell Indian Junior College. And I borrowed my sister Deborah's car, and I'd gone to the theater one night. And so I was watching that movie, Maximum Overdrive, Stephen King movie. So I've always been big into, the hard rock and heavy metal. And AC/DC did the soundtrack. The band AC/DC did the soundtrack. So I was really there to go listen to the soundtrack. I watched the movie, and it got out sometime around midnight. When I came into the lobby in the Window Rock at the theater, there was a little elderly Navajo man sitting on one of the benches there. And I started up a conversation with him. And he asked me if he could, he heard that I was living in Fort. And he said, "Can I catch a ride back over there?" And I said, sure. And so he jumped in with me and we took off. And I took him out on that long stretch of highway near what is now the new hospital in Fort. At that time, there was nothing out there. It was just long stretch. There's no lights or nothing. Took him out toward the base of the hill that goes up to Sawmill, and I dropped him off. And it was just pitch black out there. I was like, "You sure you're all right here?" I said, "Yeah." So I got up and turned around. I started on that stretch. Well, that's when I seen this thing that was running by my vehicle. And it was running on all fours. It was white from head to toe. It looked similar to what you see with a greyhound, at least race dogs that they have on dog tracks. But its back was much taller than that. The back of it came up at least about 4 foot. It had a canine-shaped head, and it had a mouthful of teeth, jagged white teeth, and so it's like I said, its eyes were like these exit signs, and at one point it was looking at me, and I locked eyes with it. I ended up sliding down in the driver's seat till I could barely see over the dash. I don't know what it did. I didn't look back at this thing. I didn't look into my rearview mirrors. At that time, there was no stoplight at that junction there. And I don't know how I made it around that corner because I was flying at that point. And I came flying into the gravel driveway at my dad's house, and I ran in, and he was still up, and I was kind of out of breath. And he asked me, "What's wrong with you?" And I told him what I experienced, what I'd seen. And that's when he said that what you seen was a Skinwalker. And before that, I'd always thought of that as fairy tale and legend, and coming from Oklahoma. We had stories in Oklahoma about shapeshifters and stuff, but seeing that right there, physically running by my vehicle, it was one of those life-changing moments, because I know this stuff is real. And so some of my protection stuff that we used over the years, cedar and Navajo medicine. And there's some of my artwork I do. Trying to, I've retired. I got the contract to write the book 2 months after I retired in Cinco de Mayo 2023. 2 months later, I got the contract to write the book, and I was able to get the book completed in 8 months. And, so I've been busy since then. This book came out October 1st, and I've been really, with the help of HarperCollins and William Morrow, promoting the book, traveling and doing book signings and all of that stuff. But I'm going to be getting back into artwork again. There I worked on the set of a Holt Hamilton film, Legend of the Fall. So I began working, and there's what I filmed with Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix, me and John. Unique experience and stuff. So the really the management of HarperCollins had ended up watching that Unsolved Mysteries episode. That's where he took interest in having, John and I, write a book about this stuff. And John and I have been traveling, like I said, we've been to Scotland and Canada and places presenting this stuff. But really, a lot of this, a big part of it was just luck. I mean, the fact that he watched that Unsolved Mysteries and took interest in it, and the fact that those young rookie rangers did what they did and ended up getting me and John assigned to oversee all of that stuff, There was a lot of different things. The unique thing though, one thing was that the chief at the time, as a little boy, he lived on the reservation out west. He was taken to live in the Mormon culture and go to school up in Salt Lake. So he was picked up as a little boy and just taken, go to school up there. John Dover was born and lived in Los Angeles, but his grandparents lived on the Navajo reservation, and his grandfather was a medicine man from up by Crystal. And me, same thing, I grew up in Oklahoma, went to school there till I graduated high school, but I'd spend the summers on the Navajo reservation. So it gave us that unique ability to see these two different worlds and to view these phenomena from two different perspectives, which was really unique. A lot of the other rangers that had been born and raised on the Navajo reservation, they've been steeped in the taboos of you don't mess with that stuff. Things involving death. Things involving death you don't mess with. That's for the medicine men to have to deal with. And but for him and I, we had that unique ability, and Chief had that ability to view this stuff, and he knew that people needed help, wanted help, and we were going to do that. So anyway, I cover the postcards. I've got some postcards out there that I can give. It's available. The book today is available. I mean, I found it in Barnes & Noble out in Torrance, California recently. I found it in Denver, Colorado at a Barnes & Noble, and Albuquerque's 2 Barnes & Nobles, one out by Cottonwood and one there at Coronado. They kind of have difficulty keeping them in stock because they sell out every time they get some in. So. But with that, I hope I've given you some insight about the book and what it's about and how I came to do, these kind of investigations. It is unique. It is strange, how it all came to be. But I've been very blessed to be able to see these phenomena with my own eyes and know that they exist. I've never been frightened by it. When I was a little boy, I'd disappear in the woods in Oklahoma. Even at nighttime, my mom would be out there calling me. Mike, get in, stand, So I was never afraid. Even working SWAT, or like I said, at times I got shot at and stuff. You just relied on your training and focus on the mission at hand. And you put your safety in the hands of the Creator. And that's what I've always done, what I do. So it's been a unique experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything, I value that. This book serves to me as kind of a PSA, public service announcement to the mass that these things do exist. Again, you may not understand it, you may not, most of the stuff I don't understand, but I do know it is real, and I've experienced it, a lot of these things. So, but we should respect those that do have these experiences. And, so with that, I want to say thank you. I think we're going to get ready to wrap this up. We're going to do a signing. Thank you.